de Daniel Laforest, qui est professeur à l'université d'Alberta au Canada, qui travaille en littérature, sur la littérature au Canada, pardon, et aussi en France, avec des comparaisons, et aussi avec une approche en cultural studies, qui travaille sur les villes plus particulièrement depuis plusieurs années, et qui a publié sur ces thématiques autant aux États-Unis qu'en France. Et donc, il va nous laisser la parole.
Merci, thank you. I'm also a francophone who's going to talk in English because, just give me a second here to pull out my talk, because this project that I'm about to present, Vertical Suburbia, has been conceived in an Anglophone context, has been conceived in English, has been conceived in partnership with colleagues and also with students in my classes, which are for the most part Anglophones as well. So, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Also, I want to extend my thanks to Juliet and to Christina as well for having me over here, like everyone does, but also for having us in such a posh environment. It's just so great. Okay, so here's my take on the banlieue. I'm not that interested. My main focus is not the politicized banlieue, be it in France or elsewhere. Mais au contraire, I'm interested in the flip side of the political, in this case, what is often called the middle classes, even though we know that they're political, but they're often used as the non-political par excellence group of people. The quaint, if you will, the banlieue dortoir that we find in France. When we say that the French banlieue have turned into clichés, we should mention that there are also clichés in the ways in which we try to fight those clichés. The threat of the common ground, of the received idea, and of the binary oppositions, like for instance, cité, the downtown versus banlieue, or banlieue versus campagne, countryside. This threat is looming large on the criticism on suburbs in France, as well as on the aesthetic and the political realms of their representations. I work in a Canadian university, University of Alberta in Edmonton, and the multimedia project I'm presenting today, Vertical Suburbia, was conceived in the urban area where my institution is located. So that's why you see, and you don't see it. Well, Saskatchewan, there you go. You got some Canadian names going on there, but don't worry, I'm going to talk about France mostly. But part of my research, like I was saying, also pertains to French literature and culture. In recent years, I've come to suspect that one of the most interesting approaches to foster a comparison between the North American and the French peri-urbanity could be found in the juxtaposition of their consensual tendencies. In other words, clichés can become useful when we see that both forms of banlieue, North America and France, produce those clichés in ways that are surprisingly similar, despite the obvious differences in urban traditions. So this presentation I'm doing today is a tentative approach in view of an adaptation of the Vertical Suburbia project in France, an actual concrete adaptation of the project, as part of my upcoming stint as a visiting scholar in Limoges, Université Limoges, Université Poitiers, and La Rochelle. In what follows, what I will do precisely is I will briefly identify 3 clichés in the French criticism of the banlieue that intersect with the ones the Vertical Suburbia project has been designed to address and to fight, and hopefully circumvent. And the second thing I will do is I will just explain the concept behind the project. Okay, so the first cliché, I had to go ahead and call it the non-lieu, because that's his name. I'm pretty sure that the French anthropologist Marc Auger had no idea of the Pandora's box of misinterpretations and misunderstandings that he was opening when he proposed the concept of non-lieu in, I think, 1992. While Auger was merely describing places that could not be studied along the lines of traditional anthropology, his concept of non-lieu quickly escaped him and became a surefire reference for critical approaches in France who attempt to Americanize, if you will, their discourse through a dehistorization of the spaces of the middle class. I've chosen someone to bash upon, I believe, the work of French essayist Bruce Bégou. You may have read him. He works in philosophy, but he also writes essays on the banlieue and urban sprawl. I believe his work embodies this tendency perfectly in France. In Bruce Bégou's books, a selection of locations depending on the American urban sprawl, Las Vegas, there's a book on Las Vegas, the roadside motel, the highway in the US, Well, a selection of those locations are turned into symbols, and their material mediocrity is then transferred arbitrarily to the nature of the life that is supposed to inhabit them. In this way, the simplicity of industrialized material space and the complexity of the human life are fused together in order to produce a single lament on the lack of authenticity of our day and age. Not to mention a deconsideration of the very notion of citizenry at heart. It is no wonder that a critic like Bruce Bégou has been able to seamlessly apply such an approach to the French banlieue. In his book, so he's got books, some of them are fiction, short stories, others are essays. For instance, Specs, L'éblouissement des bords de route. His latest one is called Suburbia, so it goes to show. So it's no wonder he was able to apply it to France, because this approach gets rid of the trouble of having to analyze the complexity of the middle class itself, as well as the complexity of the process of urbanization itself, when it declares that both have no authenticity because they have no history. So you point out at the banlieue and you say that they don't have any history, but you forget that they've been developed through a process of urbanization. It's just that you don't want to look at it. It is true that such a discourse actually originates from North America, chiefly because of the monumental history of the city by Lewis Mumford, who was against the suburbanization. But it is also true that it did not last beyond the 60s. While North America has long since embraced the historicity of its middle-class banlieue, it seems that some loud voices in France are still holding on to an outdated version of the non-lieu when it comes to the popular vision of the zone pavillonnaire or of the classe moyenne périphérique. And mostly in mid-sized cities. I should have mentioned that what I'm really interested in France is not Paris, Lyon, and the big cities that clearly have political problems in their periphery, but I'm interested in the mid-sized city that also have political problems but that are not as loud, right, or visible. The second cliche that I want to point at is, well, the language. Let me just explain. An alternative approach to this outdated discourse has recently been favored by French writer, among others, French writer Éric Chauvier, who is also an anthropologist. Annie Ernaux before him did kind of the same thing with Journal du Dehors. Chauvier's work is fascinating in that it sheds light on a more pernicious cliché in the criticism of the spaces of the French middle class. This new cliché tells us that the banality, the previsibility, and the mediocrity of those spaces actually result from a widespread, bear with me here, normalization of the language of the banlieue residents who have surrendered to the absence of authenticity of their environment. In short, the banlieue are a tragedy not of architecture or urbanism, firstly, but of language itself. There can be no history in places where people speak a language devoid of historicity. Each of Chauvier's books wants to demonstrate that this is not true. In, and I quote, it's a couple titles here, in Contre Télérama, he was against the, there was in the French magazine Télérama, there was a dossier on les banlieues as something that we Parisians don't really go there, so like queer and strange. So he wrote Contre Télérama, he wrote Sommelin, or La crise commence ou finit le bonheur. He tracks down the moments in these books, he tracks down the moments of fracture in the entrepreneurial, administrative, and normative discourses of the middle class. He also uses quotations and snippets of the citizens' discourses in various situations where they have to reclaim their identity. Those are the moments, according to Chauvier, in which the invisible language of the reality of the banlieue become audible. Those are creative moments. The third cliche is less a cliche than what I would call a limitation. Psychogeography is a word invented by the French situationists to define impromptu, concrete, creative interventions in the city space. That was back in the 50s and 60s. But if there is ever a case in which the good people of Britain took a French invention and ran away with it, this is the one. Psychogeography today is still a practice, but its history is almost exclusively tied to the city of London. We'll think of Ian Sinclair Wilsell for Alan Moore. Of course, there are practitioners of psychogeography everywhere. In France, you'll find them. Philippe Vasset, Jean Rollin, François Bon, Éric Azin are good examples. But psychogeography's long association with the city of London has created the cliché, and this is the cliché I'm talking about here, in which only large and global cities are able to provide an interesting ground for a creative approach of their suburbs. For example, much has been said about Los Angeles, about Toronto, about the London M25 motorway, and of course about the social problems in the French cité of Paris, Lyon, and Marseille. But little or no creativity, little depth, and very few stories are thought to lie under the surface of mid-sized cities in France, and elsewhere for that matter. Okay, so what about the Vertical Suburbia project? Because this is what it's all about. The Vertical Suburbia project is connected directly to those tendencies, the ones I just described for you, the cliches. It fights the illusion of inauthenticity by incorporating the point of view, and I'm going to explain that a little bit further, of the citizens of the banlieue, of the suburbs. It fights the illusion of a normalized language by a recourse to crowdsourcing. So I don't have the French equivalent to crowdsourcing, but it's just like, you know, we're all talking English. And so crowdsourcing is when you call out for contributions from people out there instead of producing your own discourse. And it fights, thirdly, it fights the domination of the global banlieue, of the global cities, by focusing on psychogeographic interventions in mid-sized cities. The problematic is as follows. Saying that the banlieue are homogeneous is another way of saying that they do not produce strangeness or otherness. The so-called homogeneity of the middle-class banlieue supposes that they do not need to be mediated or translated in order to be represented in media or literature or in art. In other words, everyone is already supposed to get any banlieue narrative, any banlieue novel, any banlieue discourse, any banlieue text or image. Nothing is more false than that, I think. The hypothesis of the project is that this is why a better comprehension of life in the banlieue today will rely on translation of other people's experiences instead of the unique deambulation or flânerie of the one artist or author. More specifically, it will rely on a notion in translation studies called the interpretant, l'interprétant. The interpretant is the supplementary meaning we create in order to make sense of the space in between two discourses, in between two stories, in between two experiences, or even two images. The Vertical Suburbia project attempts to create new interpretants out of the juxtaposition of actual experiences by different people of the banlieue and their own inhabitants. Ultimately, it wants to create alternative, plurivocal maps of today's middle-class banlieue. How does the project work and why is it called Vertical Suburbia? Well, it depends, like I said, on crowdsourcing. It depends on narrative and photographic contributions from people who are concretely experiencing the suburban locations. So we were talking this morning about the unheard voices. Well, they're right there. The guidelines of the project are simple. They go as follows. This is what people are supposed to do when they get crowdsourced. First, take a stroll in a given banlieue area, ideally not your own. Second thing you have to do, and this is something that you really have to do, look up or look down. Forsake the usual horizontal field of view. Just try not to fall down. But also focus on what you consider unusual up-down. It can be anything, the intersection of wires, picture windows in a faraway cityscape, the idiosyncrasies of rooftops and the thing people will leave on them, half-buried objects in the ground, ephemeral markings for street repairs, remnants of children games, animal markings also, the distribution of streetlights and darkness at night. Third, the final thing that people have to do is take a picture, take a photo, and write a short, free-form narrative inspired by the photo or writing experience. This whole thing is then being geolocated on a common map. The choice of a vertical angle is the methodological tool that I suppose can help to crack open the false homogeneity of the banlieue. Why? Because the homogeneity, the sameness of the suburbs is entirely produced by their horizontality, arguably. At the horizontal level, every interstice of everyday life, every transition is already accounted for. This is what the planned nature of the zone pavillonnaire is for, the elimination of ambiguity. Thus, at the horizontal level, no experience needs to be recoded. No experience needs to be retranslated. To explore the vertical life of the banlieue, the project taps instead into the micro-emotions, the micro-gestures involved in the affairs of the quotidian, the everyday lives of the city. It is those micro emotions that modify our point of view and actually make it more creative. It is also them that will need to be translated, of course, in order to maintain a common image of the city, to speak like Kevin Lynch. Just quickly, and I'm close to conclusion, but I want to show you practically how it works. How long do I have left? Am I good? Yeah, all right. So quickly, what do I mean by those micro emotions? Well, let's just think about the cliche emotions that we associate with the banlieue. Boredom. Well, boredom is associated with having your point of view, your line of sight wander. That's when you start looking up and down if you're bored. So make the most of it, right? Make it creative. Disorientation. It's associated with moving slowly, looking for bearings in a place where you're supposed to have all the signposts available for you. Strangeness, I mentioned it before, the unheimlich, right? The uncanny nature of a place that you know all too well. Well, it's associated with the sense of not belonging. That's why I did this thing with my students, actually. I crowdsourced it in a class of 90 students, and I told them to go and place in banlieue, in peripheral spaces where they would normally never go. So just to experience the strangeness of walking around when you don't know who lives there, nobody's out in the street, you feel like they're almost like looking at you through the windows. So there you go. These are the micro emotions, some of them, just a sample of the micro emotions that I'm talking about. So what I did is I can show you the visual interface right away and say a few words about what I did with the students. I'll have to stand up because I have to use the mouse. It's pretty simple, actually. You have these interfaces are available online for. You can register. I have my university buy an account for me on ArcGIS, and this one is called Story Maps. It's a bunch of apps that you can use online to build your own stories involving pictures, involving narratives. So the way it's perfect for vertical suburbia. The way it works is, here's what I did. So you have Edmonton. Sorry, it's not a French city yet. So if you zoom in, you can zoom in and out. I'd like to close that one, but this is the editing window, so this is not supposed to be here. So these are all the contributions of my students, numbered and geolocated. So if I click, say, on that one, I'm going to get, I'm going to get her picture. Her name is Daniel French. That's the name of the student. She took a picture of a church bell. In the country, well, not exactly in the countryside, on the fringe, and you can pull up her narrative here that goes along with the picture. So you can pull it up and down. It's like kind of be picky here to pull it down. But anyway, and you can move from picture to picture, narrative to narrative, and of course it moves from location to location at the same time. So it remains a critical interface because it doesn't do all the work for you. When I tell you, well, I'm good. Okay, thank you. When I was telling you about translation, it's open to interpretation, of course, because it's called Story Maps. It's supposed to build a story, but normally the story is you are building it yourself with your own material. Here, these people did not communicate between each other. And what's more important for me, is I decided to test this project with a class, like I said, of 90 persons. But Alberta being what it is today, it's these students are from everywhere, and I mean everywhere. It's the most multicultural class I've ever had in my life. They're from China, Pakistan, India, every part of India, every part of China, Japan, North America, France, Germany. I've got people from all over. And I actually had to explain to some of them what a suburb is. Because some of them did not even, mostly the Chinese people, did not even have the concept of a banlieue, a suburb. Didn't matter what language I was trying to explain it to them. They didn't even know there was a place as opposed to another place in the city. Some other students were scared to have to go out on the outskirts of town and sort of go in a place that they don't know about, even though Edmonton is really like, go in the suburbs, nothing's going to happen to you. And so it's really interesting to see that they all had to cater to the same guidelines, look up, down, look for the anomalies. But sure enough, the anomalies will be widely different depending on who's pointing its camera, depending on where that person comes from, depending on that person's bagage, if I may say, that person's background, be it in their discipline, because they were also coming from all sorts of disciplines, or of course their cultural background and their country of origin, depending on where, and their beliefs also, their religious beliefs. A lot of people went for church bells and religious symbols. Other people went for Christmas or other holiday decorations that you have everywhere. So for me, this is a way, so I'm just going to conclude here. Ultimately, I believe that what we find with a project like that is the translation of multicultural, emotional, and I insist, emotional experiences within the fabric of the middle-class banlieue. This is what the interpretants I was telling you about revealed themselves to be. Emotions that exist in between and that connect personal images and stories of the banlieue. And this is why the images and the narratives demand to be integrated into a visual network. Only then can we begin to contemplate and address an actual figure, global figure, of what mid-sized middle-class banlieue life really is today. Only then can we begin to translate what it feels to live in a space seemingly neglected by history. Thank you. That's it.
Il nous reste 10 minutes, c'est ça? 9 minutes.